So let's get into what I call the most confusing AWS service out there. And hang on with there, I'm trying to make it easy for you. So Cognito is used when we want to give our users an identity so they can interact with our servers and our application. Pretty simple, right? Except Cognito has different products. There's the Cognito user pool, and we've been seeing it slightly already before. There's a signing functionality for app users, and then it's integrated with the API gateway, and this is why we saw it first. Pretty simple. Then there is the Cognito identity pools, or federated identity. And so this is to provide AWS credentials directly to our app users so they can access our AWS resources directly. And this also has an integration with Cognito user pools as an identity provider. Don't worry, user pool and identity pool, I have a whole slide on it with diagrams. Finally, we have Cognito Sync, which is to synchronize data from a device to Cognito, and it's also probably deprecated and replaced by AppSync. AppSync, which is currently out of scope for the exam, but Cognito Sync is still asked, so I'm just going to show you what it is. Now, let's start by user pools, or CUP. So this is basically a serverless database of users for your mobile apps. And so it's a simple login, can be username or email and a password combination. And you can verify emails, you can or phone numbers, you can add multi-factor authentication, you can have password policies, and you can also enable federated identities. And this is where the confusion comes. This is basically saying you can allow your user to log in through Facebook, Google, and SAML and get an identity into your user pool. Do not mistake this for federated identities, which is different. But you can still use a Facebook login or Google login to log into your user pool. What we get back out of it is a JSON Web Token, or JWT. And this token can be used to verify the identity of someone. And this can be integrated with the API gateway for the authentication part. So how does it look like as a diagram? We have our app, and it wants to authenticate to CUP. It's going to register or login, username, password. And CUP, after verifying the login, says, okay, here is a JWT, a JSON Web Token. Fairly easy, right? So remember, a database of users, you can have email passwords, username passwords, or you can have Facebook or Google login. The second product we have is federated identity pools. And so the goal is to provide direct access to our AWS environment from the client side. So no proxy, no API, just straight access. And how do we do this? Well, we log in into a federated identity provider, or we can choose to remain anonymous. We have this option. And from this, we get temporary AWS credentials back from the federated identity pool. And then these credentials come with an IAM policy attached to it. And so we can do stuff based on this IAM policy. For example, say we wanted to provide temporary access to write to an S3 bucket using a Facebook login. This use case would be great for using federated identity pools. Let's go through a diagram. It will probably make sense, but the diagram is pretty complicated, but at least it represents the full story. Here's our app, and our app is able to log into an identity provider. The identity provider can be whatever you want. It could be Google, Facebook, Twitter, SAML, OpenID, and even the Cognito user pools we have created from before. So from there, our app gets to log in and gets a token. Nothing new. This is a basic login. But now using this token, we are going to pass it on to our federated identity pool. So we authenticate using that token to our FIP, and it will verify the token with our identity provider, just to make sure we are who we say we are. Once the token has been verified, the federated identity will talk to the STS service to get temporary credentials for AWS. Once it has that, it will pass on the temporary credentials back to our application. And now that our application has these temporary AWS credentials, it is, for example, able to interact directly with our S3 bucket. And we have an IAM policy, which allows us to do certain things and not do other things. So this is the whole idea of how federated identity pools work. As you can see, this is a pretty complex diagram, but the idea is that we trade in a login for an identity provider, and we get, in the end, temporary AWS credentials. So an access ID, a secret ID, and a temporary session token. So that's it for these two identity pools. They're very different, as you can see. The first one was just to provide an identity and to integrate with the API gateway. while this one is more to directly allow us to interact with AWS for our app users. Now, Cognito Sync is deprecated, and we should use AWS AppSync now, but it's out of scope of the exam. What is Cognito Sync? It is to store user preferences, configuration, and the state of our application, and it has a cross-device synchronization capability. Any platform, could be iOS, Android, etc. You can do offline stuff, so if you were to change your preferences offline, and then you go back online, then they're synchronized automatically, so it's a good feature. And then to have it working well, you need to use federated identity pools in Cognito, not user pools, just something to know. The data is stored in datasets, and each dataset could be up to 1 megabyte, and we can have up to 20 datasets to synchronize. So that's it for Cognito. We should just know which product to use in which situations, and we've seen this. That's all there is to this lecture. I will see you in the next one.